Welcome back to CFI, Credit, Finance, and Investing. In today's video, we're going to talk about the steps that I take when I'm buying a car. Usually, when I'm buying a car, I will look at used vehicles. I don't typically buy a new vehicle for a couple of reasons, and we've touched on those in other videos. But the highlights are, when you buy a new car, when you drive it off the lot, it is no longer a new car. It is now a used car. And the depreciation on a new car can range from up to 20 to 40% are the stats that we've seen in some of the other things that we've looked at. So without going too much further into that, I want to talk about briefly trade-ins. If you have an existing car, if you look at trading it in on a car that you're purchasing, you will usually lose a couple $1,000s in the value over what you could have if you sell the car yourself. It is much more convenient, obviously, to trade in a car. However, it's much less valuable to you. So if you have the ability to sell the car on your own, that would be the option that I would generally recommend. So jumping right into this video, I don't want it to be too lengthy. The first step in buying a car is to do your homework. Do your homework in advance. Don't just drive into a dealer lot. Don't just start looking at cars on lots, because you will not understand what's out there in the market and it will cost you money. Knowing in advance what the options are in your market and knowing if you want to drive a couple of hours to a different market are very valuable ways to buy a car. Another option, once you have done your homework, something that I have literally done and it has saved me thousands of dollars, is either on my phone, I will save the cars that I'm looking at and be able to pull them up at the dealers, or I have physically printed copies of cars that are for sale and taken them with me when I go to look for cars. What this does for me is it gives me incredible negotiating power. Knowing what's out there and even being able to show a car salesman or their manager what is on the market helps me counter the argument that I frequently come across of, there's nothing else in the market at this price or you'll never find anything like it. If I have multiple cars in hand with advertisements of available cars, it takes away that argument from the car salesman. So when I'm talking about doing homework and doing your homework in advance, I will generally find what the site is that is prevalent in the market. So for example, in the Seattle market where I've purchased a bunch of cars, I typically will look at Craigslist. For whatever reason, Craigslist is where a lot of cars are sold. In the Utah, Nevada, Idaho market, KSL or Facebook Marketplace are used frequently, so understand what it is that you're looking at. Right now I have up the Craigslist cars and truck site, and I've done a quick search for the Ford F-150, one of the most popular trucks for sale on the market today. And what I will do when I'm doing my homework is figure out about what price point do I want to be at. For right now, let's say I have a $15,000 price point for a truck. There's a few key factors that I will want to do. Number one, of course, is the price. So here I'm going to put a minimum price in of $1,000. You can do $2,000. It doesn't really matter. In fact, let's do $3,000 right now. Now, why do I want to put the minimum price in? Some car dealers, when they're advertising prices, will not advertise the price of the car. They'll advertise the monthly payment they think they can get a well-qualified borrower to, or a well-qualified buyer to. And then I will also go up to, let's say, $17,000. Why $17,000 when I'm looking at when I'm looking at a $15,000 price point? Well, I'm going to plan on negotiating that price down. So on that note, when you are working with car dealers, I'll generally call and check the availability of a car. Something that you'll find is either people get lazy and don't take down cars that sold, or they leave them up intentionally to try to sucker people into the dealerships and hope they can sell them another car. That's a very frequently used tactic by a lot of car dealers. So $3,000 to $17,000. The odometer is something that I always want to set in there. And I'll just put the bottom number. I don't really care, because as long as I'm filtering by some number, if someone's not going to list the miles on their car, generally it's because they're high. And on the high end, honestly, on a Ford, I probably don't want to go over about 120,000 miles. Now, will a Ford go farther than 120,000 miles? Of course they will. But I'm going to be driving this car, so I want to set that low, and I will prefer to get a lower mileage car and pay a little bit more than a higher mileage car that has all the options and pretty and has all the things that may not actually help the longevity of the car. Model year, it really depends on what I'm looking for, but on this particular one, let's just say about a 2007. for no real particular reason, and of course I'll go as frequent as it wants to. And I will not buy a car that's not, or a truck that's not four-wheel drive, just because I do a lot of driving in snow and mud and other things where I would need that. You could put in a bunch of other filters, just get what's important to you, but understand that every filter you add eliminates certain cars. There are some people selling cars that don't understand how to list them, and they may not put in all the options. So I'm going to hit the highlights of what I need to have. I'll hit apply and filter it out by that. Now, you'll see that filter it way down to only 4 cars in the local market. And these cars are ranging from, it looks like 14,800 up to 16,995. And you would think that the 16,995 would have all the better options, the lower miles and whatnot, but in this particular case, no. The 14,800 model car has 87,000 miles on it, where the most expensive car has 104,000 miles on it. It is not really a competition. So let's just drill in on the lowest option car. On this particular one, it looks like it is a private individual who's selling it, which is always my preference. I would rather buy from a private individual than a dealer, simply because they usually will give details. A dealer won't have any information. It may not be as clean, it may not have been detailed, but that's okay. If I can save a few $1,000s, I can either clean it myself or I can pay to have it detailed for only a couple $100s. So in this particular one, I'm looking at what the description is. Lower mileage truck, 5.0 V8. Newer tires, always a good thing. New tires on a truck can cost you a couple of $1,000s depending on where you buy them. Tonneau cover, great. And then the other thing that I'm going to start doing is I'm going to look at the car itself and drill in and see how close I can get on these pictures. A lot of cars will say they are a clean title, but that does not mean necessarily no accidents. And I'll do this when I get there and look at the car also. But in the pictures, I'm going to look and see, are the body lines straight? Does it look like there's any different gaps between these? When it comes from the factory, it's built by robots generally, and the line will be, the spacing here will be the same all the way down. If I see differences, it means it's been adjusted or possibly had a wreck before. And just go around and see if everything looks like it's normal. See if you can see any signs of rust. How do the seats look? Are there rips? Are there tears? Did the engine have wires sticking out? You can see here where the wire loom is in this plastic cover. If the wires are out of that, it means they may have had wiring issues. There may be an issue with that. But everything on this particular one looks okay, and this would be a car that I'd go to look at. I may come back and take a look at some of these other cars also. So for example, this $16,000 truck, for whatever reason doesn't show the year, but it only has 46,000 miles on it. Would I pay a little bit more for a 46,000 mile truck versus a 100,000 mile truck? Of course I would. So in this particular case, we come in and find out it's a 2010 versus a 2011. Well, that's going to be very comparable typically. 46,000 miles, one owner. Now that's difficult to verify, but you can do some VIN searches, either a Carfax or a vehiclehistory.com or a vincheck.info, or all sites that you can plug the VIN in and go take a look at it. Tires have less than 3,000 miles. So again, this would be a truck that I would go look at and see if everything looks good in person. So this is the initial research phase. And as you're going through the initial research phase, sometimes people will say, well, have you looked at Kelley Blue Book? And what I would say in these situations is, sure, it's okay to look at Kelley Blue Book, but Blue Book is almost irrelevant in today's market, where you have multiple options to go look at actual cars for sale. What Blue Book does is it tells you where people have bought and sold cars for before historically over a broad period of time and in a geographic area, theoretically. But what Blue Book does not do is it doesn't show you what actually cars are trading for today, and I've seen it be off by several $1,000s. So this is Kelley Blue Book. There's also NADA that people look, and it varies by market on accuracy, but in this particular case, let's go ahead and come in and look at price a new or used car. And let's just go ahead and take the 2010 that we were just looking at, Ford F-150, and let's go with the crew cab. And let's just do a 98042, which is a southern Washington, kind of Kent area zip code that I just happen to know off the top of my head. And then we want to get into the details on this car. So you'll see you have a few different options of see cars for sale, which is a valuable one, but in this particular case, let's go ahead and build and price. And again, it held the 2010 value, so we're going to come in and we're going to look at this and say, okay, well, we've got a XL pickup 4x4, the XLT, which is a higher end. You'll notice that says lower price, the XL pickup 4x4 here. So let's just take a look and see if this car gives us those details. It does not, which is not surprising because again, this is a private party listing and they don't go in and put in all the details typically. So we can always come in here and look at this 2015 and they give us the VIN actually, but they don't give us the details either. So we'll just make some assumptions. We'll go with the XLT. It's a little higher end, 6.5 foot bed. Let's put in the 80, let's just put in 80,000 miles. And again, we're not going for perfection here. We're just trying to get a good feel for what we're seeing. Let's go with the silver truck, the powertrain on this one. Interesting, they don't have the 5.0 that we were looking at. So let's go with the closest 5.4. Four-wheel drive, of course, as I mentioned. It does not have the FX2 Sport. I don't believe it would have the advanced track. These are all details that you could look up. Most of the older cars are not going to have the keyless start. They may have a sliding rear window. They should have air conditioning, and by the way, you'll want to test that. And most won't have a power sliding rear window, but they will have a sliding rear window. But again, verify those details because all of these will either add or detract from the price, at least on the Blue Book. Now, you'll find when you trade in a car, dealers don't typically give you benefits for the option. And when you're buying a car, you may or may not care about some of these options. So just take a look at them, make sure that you know what you're getting. And we'll come in and just say, okay, well, these are pretty much the standard options. This one of those did have a tonneau cover, so let's just throw that in for poops and giggles. Hit next. And this gives you a few different options. Are you buying from a dealer? Are you buying from a certified dealer or a certified car from a dealer or buying private party? Let's just leave it as buying from a dealer. Actually, let's take it to buying from private party. And let's go with a very good condition. In this case, Blue Book tells you your car should be anywhere between $11,626 and $14,827. So with an average of 13.2. If we come in and look at the cars that are for sale, we're 14 to 16, which is much higher than Blue Book is. Now, you could go and try to argue with the private individual and tell them that their price is too high, but unless you have actual data, you may find that they're not going to budge on price. And most of the time, dealers will not budge on price if they know cars are selling for that in the market. So that's where it comes in handy to actually have physical cars for sale that you know in the area that you can buy at that price. And then it gives you a very good amount of negotiating power. So what other things do I look at when I'm buying a car? Now, I've mentioned doing your homework. You go out, you do the homework first online. You can make phone calls. Websites are available. There's AutoTrader. There is Cars.com. There's Facebook Marketplace. There's KSL in the certain Western states that they're operating in. There's sometimes niche market sites that you know if you live in the area. So find out what those are. Do your homework in advance. Once you've done your homework, go look at the cars. Don't necessarily plan on walking away with the first car that you see. You need to do your homework. You need to see the cars. When I'm looking at cars, I will look, as I mentioned, at body lines. Body lines are important because it's very difficult to get a car that's wrecked to have similar body lines to a factory robot installed body. So that's the first thing that I do. Then I will look at the car for signs of rust, especially in some of the Midwest states or colder states where you get a lot of snow and ice, where they use chemicals or salt on the roads. That will erode cars very quickly. It'll erode the exhaust lines, drive lines, anything underneath the car if it's not undercoated or treated. So don't be afraid to get on your hands and knees, look underneath the car, even crawl underneath the car if you think that there's something shady or hokey going on, and make sure that car does not have anything more than surface rust. Or if it does, you have that fixed by the dealer, or you get a significant price discount, because that will only continue and you need to get it treated. Look for leaks. And a lot of times if it's a dealer, they'll move it around. If you're buying it from a private individual, check the driveway. You'll see if there's any leaks underneath or around the car. If they've moved the car, you'll be able to tell. Or look on the underside of the oil pan and the transmission, the body rails. Look and see if there's leaks of the fluid, and you want to find out if it's a problem. Little leaks on old cars is not always a big deal, but they also could be a sign of something else going wrong. Oil, of course, is generally the oil color or black. Transmission fluid's usually red. Green is going to be, at least in a lot of your American cars, green will be antifreeze or coolant. Understand what it is that you have. Now, when I'm looking at a car also, I want to make sure that I see it at a cold start. I don't want it to have been driven recently within the last couple of hours by the owner. I want to see how it starts when it's been sitting. Best case, overnight, especially if it's cold, because that's where you'll generally find a lot of the problems. You can hear when it starts. If it has trouble starting, it's going to have trouble starting for you. Once I get it started, I want to just listen to it, let it run for a while, let it sit for 5-10 minutes while it's running. That gives you a good chance to see how the car heats up. You can mess around with the radio, make sure the radio works, there's no blown speakers, make sure the windows all go up and down if they're automatic. Most cars today have automatic windows, there's not a lot of hand rolling windows. Make sure they go up and down smooth and at the same speed all the way through the cycle. If not, you may have an engine problem, you may have voltage problems. It could tell you that something else is wrong. If you have blown speakers, it's going to tell you someone's probably been rocking out pretty hard in that car. And not that that's a bad thing. My wife has blown speakers in her cars, but you want to make sure that it works well for you. Or if it doesn't, you can negotiate a discount or get it checked out by someone else. Sometimes people, when they're selling cars, especially private individuals, will try to meet you somewhere. And I understand it's a privacy thing, but I generally will try to talk them out of it because I want to see that car start cold also. I want to see what that looks like, how does it start, and I want to see if there's any fluids leaking on the driveway or the road in the immediate area of that car, just to make sure that there's no problems. Once you've done that, the initial startup, look at the engine. See if you hear exhaust leaks. See if you see any leaks on the top of the engine. See if you see wires popping out of the engine bay. If there's something that doesn't look right, it gives you indications that there may have been work done on that car in an unprofessional manner that could be a problem for you. Always take the car for a test drive. When you're out on your test drive, don't just drive it like a grandma. You want to push it a little bit. So drive it slow, drive it fast, punch it. Make sure it goes through all of these gears very quickly. If you can get it on the freeway, you can start from a pretty slow start, punch it and see if it shifts smoothly all the way up to speed. If it doesn't, again, that could be a problem. Watch for smoke coming out of the tailpipe. If it's cold and you have a little bit of normal smoke, that's not a problem. But if you have a white smoke or blue smoke coming out of the exhaust pipe, especially after it's been driving for a while, that's an indicator of a bigger problem and it should probably go in to see a mechanic. We don't have time to talk about all of the problems that you'll run into on something like that, but make sure you're watching for those details. When you're looking at the car also, and this is going back to when you're checking in the engine bay, check all the fluids. Pull the oil, the dipstick, the transmission dipstick. Smell them. If they smell burnt, you have a problem. Check your brake fluid, check your coolant, make sure that they're at the proper levels. If the coolant has a lot of dirt in it, if it looks muddy, you might have a problem there. If the oil looks like a milkshake, if it looks not like your standard oil color, if it looks really milky, that could be a sign of a head gasket issue. So there are little things like this that you can look at that help protect you as you're going forward. And then if there's something wrong, if there's a smell that doesn't sound right, if it's not driving right, if it's shimmying, if there's something that just doesn't feel right, always feel free to take it to a mechanic. And if the seller will not let you take it to a mechanic, there's probably a clue there that there's something wrong. Even if you have to pay a mechanic a couple $100s, it may save you thousands going forward. Now here's a little story that happened to myself and my wife. My wife and I were looking at a car that my wife really liked. When we drove it, something didn't feel right. It just felt like there was something not quite, to me it felt like a shimmy, but it was a consistent thing that told me that there may be something wrong with that car. Now I work on cars a lot, but I couldn't pinpoint it, so we took it into a car shop really quick. And they were able to get it up on a lift and look at it and came back and said, well, we don't see anything particularly troubling as far as tire wear or anything loose underneath the car. However, we did find this, and they pulled up a picture on their phone, and on the bottom of the transmission, someone had put JB Weld, which is an epoxy weld for those who don't know, over a hole in the transmission, meaning that someone had done some damage to it. It probably had leaked fluid out, and then they had patched it with this epoxy finish instead of welding it or replacing a transmission part, which is very indicative of a larger problem. Naturally, we walked away from that car, and by the way, car transmissions in the newer cars can be $5,000 to $10,000 to replace, which is a significant add to the price of any car. So these are all the things that I'll look for, and then once you find the car that you like, don't be afraid to negotiate at all. If you have the information showing that there are other cars selling in the area, you have a lot of power to negotiate that price. Some dealers will not negotiate price. Most private party individuals will, and a lot of dealers will. I have seen prices come down $2,000 to $3,000 in situations where car dealers want to sell. Understand also the dynamics of car dealers. Car dealers like to sell cars within a month period, so a lot of times at the beginning of the month, historically, you will not get as good of a price if you negotiate as you will if you're at the end of the month. Not all car dealers are that way, but some are. Private individuals, a lot of times if the car's been sitting for a while, just want to get rid of it, and they'll negotiate on price also. So don't be afraid to ask for a lower price, to negotiate. Don't be afraid to walk away and come back the next day if you need to. You do risk losing the car if it sells, but you also gain the chance of getting a much better price on that car. Hopefully these tips and tricks help you. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to put them down in the comments below. If this video has been helpful to you, please like and send it to someone that it may benefit. And also, please consider subscribing. Thank you.